in Hasura V1, V2, we introspected databases and data models and allowed you to kind of create and bootstrap the creation of a GraphQL API on top of that, right? So it was kind of like instant GraphQL on data. With V3, the building block that we have is instant GraphQL on code, which is what I find awesome as something that I think unlocks just a lot of possibilities, right? So just like we introspect data, now you can introspect functions. Your V2 engine would become a connector. So your V2 engine would just get upgraded to a Postgres connector. Instead of it being a V2 engine, your Docker image there would get upgraded to a connector, and then you can run DDN. You can run against DDN, which is one format of running it. The other format of running it is that you can run the whole thing existing. You can run that locally as well. You can just run that with Docker, both V3 engine, etc., and whatnot. And I know that we've been a little bit slow on GitHub, but we're speeding up, and you're seeing kind of like a bunch of those things get shipped pretty quickly. If you're kind of watching for like watch the issue, subscribe on the issue and stuff like that. But also, this is my version of like and subscribe. But yes, please do like and subscribe that issue. I think if you can put in details about your use case as a comment, what this will enable for you, that also helps us give us more information on prioritizing it, right? If you can understand why this is useful to you and why this would be useful to other people, right? The more people it impacts, the more it helps us prioritize. So
this is our AMA section for Tanmai folks. So if you have any questions, they can be, obviously, we would think about things related to Hasura, DDN, V3, but if you want to know his favorite color, favorite sushi roll, whatever it may be, go ahead and throw it out there. And I was asked to start things off just before the questions start pouring in. So I have kind of an open-ended question. What are you most looking forward to about DDN?
Yeah, so it's a good question. It's a pretty loaded question as well because there's a lot there, right? So the last time when I was kind of talking about DDN and reviewing DDN, right, I mentioned one of those kind of core key change in V3 and DDN that is kind of the underlying building block that powers all of the features that you see, right? And that building block is essentially the change in the way that we handle metadata. So instead of metadata being inside a database, and that being dynamic, now that metadata is more like configuration that is provided to a Hasura at startup, right? This separates out the build time part of Hasura from the runtime part of Hasura and allows for a lot of things, but especially kind of on the operational side, much lower latency, much better, much like near sub-millisecond startup times, all of that, right? So a lot of operational amazingness kind of comes in from that core fact, right? And a lot of the stuff that we talk about is essentially kind of derivatives of those things. I think the thing that I'm the most excited about when it comes to V3D and kind of other than that and other than that code change is the way that in Hasura V1 and V2, we introspected databases and data models and allowed you to kind of create and bootstrap the creation of a GraphQL API on top of that, right? So it was kind of like instant GraphQL on data, right? So you had a database and you said, I have articles and authors, and we looked at that and we gave you a GraphQL schema that was extremely powerful, right? It's if you look at the Hasura GraphQL API versus say a GraphQL API that you'd use a framework to auto-generate those resolvers, it's very different. You with Hasura, you can filter article by the author's property, right? Which is awesome, which is so useful. You can do top-end queries, which are very hard to do if you have like if you're not query compiling and stuff like that. With V3, the building block that we have is instant GraphQL on code, which is what I find awesome as something that I think unlocks just a lot of possibilities, right? So just like we introspect data, now you can introspect functions. And so a big part of the conversation that's happening in chat as well is we're kind of talking about TypeScript connectors and TypeScript functions, right? So if you look at how the TypeScript connector works, it's the same idea, right? You just like we introspected a table and figured out like these are the things we can do, you can then kind of go and introspect a TypeScript function and say, hey, this is how it should come up in a GraphQL schema eventually, right? We can do that for TypeScript. I was talking to Tristan a few weeks ago. We can do that for Python with Pydantic, right? You can do that for Java. You can do that for, I think, I was talking to someone in the team and they hacked out a version with Go. So, you just write a Go function, bam, it's in your GraphQL API. It's the schema's taken care of. You're not doing all of these type shenanigans and whatnot. It becomes particularly exciting, I think, when we think about frameworks like Nest.js or Java Spring Boot, for example, right? Like imagine you have like a Spring Boot API or a TypeScript Express API or something like that. It's already done, without any work. You just introspect them and it kind of comes in. So like that ability to introspect code and not just data, I feel like that's it's cool. Like it's very cool. Like, there's a amazing amount of things that you can do with that kind of building block, just like what we did with data. So yeah, that's what I'm most pumped about.
Yeah.
Um,
Seems like we have a couple of questions that are coming in. One, starting things off is about the migration from V2 to V3 and what that's going to be like. Do you want to talk about that quickly?
Yeah, for sure. So the V2 to V3 migration is something that we're actively working on. I think our time frame that we're thinking about is sometime during Hasura Con this year is when we want to kind of have um, near full parity for you to upgrade easily. And I think Rahul, one of the folks on the team, is working on, and Lyndon, these are the two folks who are kind of spearheading the migration tooling. So there's kind of a V2 to V3 upgrade tool that will help you do the upgrade. Um, so the upgrade path is going to require some time. I would say that you'll need maybe you maybe want to take out a day or so for doing the upgrade. And the way it would work is that you kind of take your upgrade tool, you'd run it against your existing Hasura instance, right? And metadata. And what that will do is that will kind of modify the metadata from the old format into the metadata for the new format. So we kind of do like a code mod where we switch that over into the new metadata format. So that's the first piece that you'll have to upgrade. The second piece that you'll have to upgrade is you'll have to just think about where you want to run Hasura, right? Um, because with V3, the place that we want to kind of make super efficient and scalable and cheaper than any other option that you have is running it on DDN, right? Where at the at low scale, DDN pricing should be similar to what you'd get on DigitalOcean. At high scale, it should be like 10x cheaper. Um, but sometimes you don't want to run it on a DDN. You want to run it yourself, or you want to run it locally, or you want to keep it running where it is and not touch it, right? So when you kind of that piece, you'd upgrade your kind of existing V3 engine that you like your V2 engine that you have. Your V2 engine would become a connector. So your V2 engine would just get upgraded to a Postgres connector. Instead of it being a V2 engine, your Docker image there would get upgraded to a connector. And then you can run DDN. You can run against DDN, which is one format of running it. The other format of running it is that you can run the whole thing existing. You can run that locally as well. You can just run that with Docker, both V3 engine, etc., and whatnot. So, V3 engine and the Postgres connector, you can run all of that wherever you're running V2 right now. So those are the two things to work through. um, and the tool should help you make sure that you're able to get the metadata mod running. You just have to follow the docs for where you want to choose how to change the deployment model if you want to change it at all. All options should be relatively seamless. And I think the kind of there are bits that are different in V3 fundamentally from the way that we do it in things in V2. And those bits are particularly things like actions or remote schemas. So for example, actions, you'll have actions that won't have a GraphQL type definition anymore, but will have a TypeScript definition now because we're introspecting the TypeScript function to do the same thing. So again, the tool will kind of help you do that migration. And maybe you just want to eyeball that once, sign off on it, type check, compile, and deploy. So reserve about a day, and that would help you do the upgrade. It's unfortunately not like a fully automated 30-second process, um, but but you will be able to migrate automatically, and it should not take like 6 months of your time.
Got it. Got it. There's another question here about moving from V2 to V3, and it's asking if there's going to be a metadata API available in V3 as there was in V2.
Correct, exactly, right. So that's the yeah. Yes, in a slightly different way though. So you'll have something better than the metadata API, so that you can do everything via um, yeah, you can do everything via code. You can do everything via CLI. We aren't introducing a lot of console features for metadata authoring upfront because the CLI will have all of those features, and LSP already has some of those features, right? But the idea is that instead of kind of so here's kind of one of the experiences that we're targeting that hopefully we'll be able to show off kind of next time or sometime soon. the console experience today on V2 is you kind of go into the console, right? And you say, hey, add a database, and you add a Postgres URL. And then you're like, track table, track table, track table, track relationships, boom, right? API, which is awesome. What we want to do is bring that experience onto the CLI. So what you can do is you can say, Hasura Postgres wizard, and then just like the console flow, you have like the CLI flow that will say, hey, give me a Postgres URL. You put in your Postgres URL, say like, hey, I found like 1,000 tables. Go. You're like, yes, go. I found like, 50 relationships, possible relationships, go. Yes, just bang it in and done. Right. And then when you want to iterate on that, you can just look at your metadata and iterate on it. And LSP will give you the same kind of autocomplete that console gave you and stuff like that. So that's the kind of change in experience. The idea is to keep the ease that you got on console, but to make kind of the more complex workflows and some of the CI/CD stuff, some of the team collaboration, version control stuff a lot easier. That's kind of the benefit that you get with that metadata being more explicit. Yeah, so that's the long answer to Pataki, your short question.
I look forward to that day when I never have to leave my terminal to do anything. That'll be wonderful. Let's see. There's one that's a little bit more general. It's just talking about how we're looking for feedback. It's saying regarding GitHub issues or comments or adding, emojis to issues more useful for the Hasura team to gauge interest.
So it is extremely, extremely helpful. Please, please, please do. And I know that we've been a little bit slow on GitHub, but we're speeding up and you're seeing kind of like a bunch of those things get shipped pretty quickly. So please pass in your comments, give us information. Like the at a bare minimum, just go in and put an emoji. That's super helpful. And especially if you're kind of watching for it, like watch the issue, subscribe on the issue and stuff like that. But also, this is my version of like and subscribe. But yes, please, please do like and subscribe that issue. I think if you can put in details about your use case as a comment, what this will enable for you, that also helps us give us more information on prioritizing it, right? If we can understand why this is useful to you and why this would be useful to other people, right? The more the more people it impacts, the more it helps us prioritize. So that information is great.
I think we probably have time for one more question, and it came in the Q&A section, and it may be a little bit of a misconception around how things are being handled in V3 with regard to migrations. So it says, will there be some breaking changes to the database migrations? Do you want to talk about how we're doing migrations in V3 compared to V2?
Yeah, so we're separating out the migration tooling for V3. So it's no longer explicitly a part of like your V2 metadata management. So it stands alone separately as a migration tool by its side, where you can just do the same migrate up, migrate down. You can use any other migration tooling as well, and that's kind of the feedback that we got from a lot of our users, especially in kind of like more brownfield situations where, like in enterprise, for example, or in a situation where you already have an existing app, you have maybe Rails's migration system or Java migration system or something like that that's already running, Django and stuff like that. They have great migration tooling. So you can continue to use that. You can continue to use Hasura's migration tooling as is, and that'll kind of sit outside the metadata tooling. So we've just kind of decoupled that. Um, shouldn't be any breaking changes. You should just be able to use it the way it is. Yeah, that's the quick answer there.
Awesome. Anything you want to say in parting before we shift to the next part of our call here?
No, I think that's all I had. Thanks, folks. Thanks for having me, Rob.
Thanks so much for coming on.